doing my instructor lesson. So this is my lesson plan. U.S. History 1, 10th grade. And I actually taught this lesson. I taught all during spring break. And this was the day one. So let's see. Of course, you got your standard right here. I was talking about the era of good feelings directly after the War of 1812. Central focus. Students will be able to contrast the dynamics of economic nationalism during the era of good feelings with the corresponding sectional divisions between parts of the United States. Students will also be able to identify the cause and effects of slavery and the rise of the plantation system. And students will also be able to identify the causes and effects of the beginning of industrialism in the Northeast. All right, so here we got our essential questions for that day I taught. What was the time period after the War of 1812? Why was the time period after the War of 1812 referred to as the era of good feelings? Big one, what is sectionalism? And what key factors increase sectionalism throughout the United States? And so what I noticed that Charles Henderson in particular being in there observing is that they have a lot of struggling readers. Like some of the kids, I would guess their reading levels are still like seventh grade or lower. It's pretty rough. So that's why I put them into very strategic groups where after observing for a few weeks, I figured out the ones that struggle a lot, and I figured out the ones that usually do pretty well in work. And I tried to situate the groups that way you'd have maybe one person who's really good, up to standard, with a few struggling students. So, and what I also did was I would walk through whatever activity I gave them. We'll see in a second. I'd walk through and we try to put stuff into student language. And so for the lesson objectives for this day, students will be able to list key factors during the era of good feelings that increase sectionalism within the United States. Students will be able to chart which key factors different regions within the United States supported and opposed. And students will be able to draw information from secondary sources to gather the necessary information to fill out the charts. All right, so one of my informal activities, assessments, is a vocabulary visual aid. I went to Dollar Tree. I bought three big posters for his three classes. And each day, for the first day, we added any words that either I put on there or they did not know. And we put them on the poster board and we put them in the easier language that they would understand instead of the, book definitions. And formal, I have a chart here. Let's see if I can go back to Google Classroom. Let's see here. We're going to stop sharing that for now. Now I'm going to start sharing the document that I made. All right, so this is the sectional issue chart, and I'll show you just in a second where they were supposed to get the information from. So this was like the formal activity for the day. We graded it at the end, for completeness and accuracy. I know I misspelled terrace right there. It's all right. So basically, we have all these different ideas. Different things that were within America. Your tariffs, internal improvements, land claims, and banks. These were all big issues at the time in the era of good feelings. And so the secondary source I had them use, let's go back to Google Classroom, to Microsoft Teams, stop sharing, I'll share. Here we go. So here's the website I used. It's sageamericanhistory.net. And basically starting right here where it says sectional issues 1815 to 1860, you have each of the little subheadings I had, tariffs, internal improvements, land policy, banks. And I didn't do slavery on this day because the next day is when I focused more on slavery. But what I really liked about this website is each of the little subheadings that they had to fill out, it's in bold right here. You see? So instead of being given a giant text, at least it's subheaded for them so they can go in, look at the information, and they can work together in their groups to figure out what they need to put for each side to determine what the sectional issues were and who fell on, okay, we're for, uh, building roads and stuff for internal improvements and why they were for it. And then you have, the other side of the coin, why they did not support, the federal government spending money on internal improvement. So it's just a fun little resource activity right here that I really think is good for them to experience something like this. Because what I noticed in the class is he just basically gave them all the information, and this kind of challenges them to work together to find the information for themselves. And I'll show you. I got the PowerPoint too that I used. It's I don't have it pulled up right now, but it was just a basic Google PowerPoint with the section 1 issues on it. So let's go back to the lesson plan. So of course, I always like starting out my classes with just a little set the hook, get them thinking about why we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about today. So that's my introduction. Also during the introduction and instructional sequence, it kind of goes hand in hand. We're going to create that vocabulary visual aid. I'm going to have the list of words that I want us to define together. I'm going to have the real definition, and I wrote the real definition. Here's some of the words right here: sexualism, tariff, arrogant feelings, internal improvements, economic nationalism. Those are a few of the words I used, but we did a few other ones that they didn't understand, and we put it into language that they would understand. And it was fun. They they're crazy, so they gave me a bunch of random stuff, but we got it down together. I wish I had a picture of it, but I left it in his room. So basically, after we start doing that, we have our vocab list. We're going to add on to that. We added on to that day 2 and day 3. And so basically, we go into my PowerPoint, and it's a very short PowerPoint because I don't like being too long with it because I know it gets boring. And so go through the PowerPoint. That gives them all their information. That gives them the background that they need. And ideally, I would give them like an outline or something to fill out. That way, I make sure they're paying attention. But also, I knew that the assignment I had them do would reinforce what we talked about. So that's why I did not have one for this. And so we go through the PowerPoint together. I'm asking them questions, asking them if they understand, trying to get some discussion out of them. It's hard to get a bunch of 10th graders to think deeply when they have a lot of other stuff that they're thinking about at the time, but that's what I attempted to do. And so after after my teaching, I split them up into my groups that I had laid out in my head for each of the classes, and I'd given them the assignment where they were to look at the internet source, the secondary source, and to fill out their chart. And it went pretty well. The problem was the really good students, they seem to do more of the work, but that's where I came in and I made sure I walked around the classroom the whole time, and kind of just being around them, it forced them to at least try to look at the document and do something. And one of my favorite students, Jordan, uh, he's really struggler, but he likes when I would help him, and so I'd work with him mostly, and we'd go through each little subheading, and we would pick out stuff that he didn't understand, and we would get through it. And I found out after the class that actually after the 3 class sessions I did in a row, that he hadn't done any of the work for the actual teacher, but when I was there and helping him, he had completed, 3 assignments that I had him do. And so that was basically the whole entire lesson for that day one and how it would work out. Uh, I'll throw in a little bonus here because I love this little assignment that I did show him. This was day 2 directly the next day. Let's see. So we talked about, the sectional issues that were coming up. And the next day, we kind of segued that into the market revolution that went on kind of around this time, industrialization, the invention of, these 6 things right here. And so what I had them do was get in 6 different groups. And if you ever seen the show Shark Tank where they pitch like new inventions, this is what I had them do. And so that was really fun. I think the honors class really enjoyed this more than the standard class. Standard class just looked at it like it was a bunch of extra work. But man, they were some entertaining things indeed. I even let some of them, I made a classroom TikTok and we did that. So, yeah. That's my lesson. Uh give me some feedback on what y'all would have done differently, and thank you very much.